Story 1. The hitchhiker who never left the highway stretched endlessly. Its asphalt, a ribbon of faded gray swallowed by the darkness of rural America. 4 college friends, Ethan, Claire, Marcus, and Genoa, crammed inside Ethan's aging Honda Civic. Their laughter thinning as fatigue set in. They had been driving since late afternoon, headed back to campus after a weekend hiking trip in the mountains. The clock on the dashboard blinked past midnight, and the empty road pressed down with an eerie silence. That was when they saw him. At first, he looked like a trick of the headlights, just a dark shape standing on the shoulder of the highway, motionless, with his thumb raised stiffly. As they drew closer, the beams revealed a young man in his early 20s, shaggy hair plastered to his pale forehead, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans torn at the knees. His backpack hung limply from one shoulder. "Don't," Claire muttered from the passenger seat. "It's the middle of nowhere. This is how horror movies start." "Come on," Marcus said from the back. He looked stranded. "What if it were you out there?" Ethan hesitated, the wheel trembling slightly in his hands. Then, against his better judgment, he slowed and pulled to the shoulder. Gravel crunched as the Civic stopped. The hitchhiker opened the rear door without a word and slid into the seat next to Marcus. His movements were stiff, deliberate, and Marcus swore later that he never heard the door actually latch shut. "Where you headed?" Ethan asked, forcing casualness. The hitchhiker didn't look at him. He stared straight ahead, his face pale in the dim dome light. "Down the road," he said flatly. His voice was cold, as though unused. No one spoke for several minutes. The air inside the car grew heavier, and Ethan noticed the temperature dropping. He nudged the heat dial higher, but it made no difference. Claire shifted uncomfortably, her arms wrapped tight around herself. "Do you have a name?" she asked. The hitchhiker finally turned. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "James," he said. Then, after a pause, "This stretch of road is dangerous. People die here." The friends exchanged uneasy glances. What do you mean?" Jenna asked nervously. James leaned back, his face half hidden in shadow. "A long time ago, there was an accident, car full of kids. They picked up a hitchhiker. Car swerved, everyone died, burned alive." His words were delivered without inflection, like someone reading a weather report. Marcus forced a laugh. "That's creepy. You're not telling us ghost stories, are you?" James didn't respond. Instead, he lowered his gaze to his hands. Ethan caught a glimpse of them in the mirror scarred, the skin peeling as if burned. Something about it made his stomach knot. The car's fuel gauge suddenly dipped, dropping from half a tank to nearly empty in seconds. Ethan swore under his breath, slapping the gauge, but it didn't move. At the same moment, the radio silent for hours hissed, alive with static, though no station came through. "Maybe we should pull over," Claire whispered. Ethan's pulse pounded. "Yeah, maybe." Before he could finish, James spoke again. "This is where it happened, right here." They never saw it coming. The headlights illuminated the dark smear of tire marks on the road, stretching toward a twisted guardrail. Beyond it, a black ravine yawned open, the drop dizzying. Claire gasped. "Oh my God, Ethan, slow down." Ethan slammed the brakes, the car jerking violently. They skidded to a stop just before the broken guardrail. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the frantic beating of their hearts. Ethan turned in his seat to tell James to get out, but the back seat was empty. Marcus stared wide-eyed. He was just here. The seat belt was still buckled, hanging slack across nothing. The faint smell of charred rubber and coppery blood filled the car. "No," Jenna whispered. "No, no, no." They tore away from the scene, speeding down the highway until the road opened into the glow of a small-town diner. Ethan pulled into the lot, the car shaking with leftover adrenaline. Inside, the diner was bright, welcoming. The friends stumbled to a booth, their nerves frayed. A waitress brought them coffee without asking. "You kids look like you've seen a ghost," she said lightly. Claire almost laughed, but the sound came out broken. "We might have." As Ethan reached for the menu, his hand froze. On the wall above their booth hung a faded newspaper clipping, laminated and yellowed with age. The headline read, "Local hitchhiker killed in highway crash, 1975. The grainy photograph beneath showed a young man with shaggy hair, wearing a flannel shirt, his expression hauntingly familiar. The 4 of them sat in stunned silence, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. And though they were safe in the diner, Ethan swore the air around them still smelled faintly of smoke. Story 2. The vanishing motel. The interstate seemed endless, the blacktop stretching across miles of empty desert. Sarah and Daniel had been driving for 14 straight hours. the glow of their headlights carving tunnels through the night. Their plan had been ambitious: cross 3 states in a single day and reach their new home before dawn, but exhaustion had long since set in. "Let's stop soon," Sarah murmured, her forehead pressed against the cold window. Daniel nodded, scanning the horizon. That was when he noticed it, a flickering neon sign off the frontage road, "Sleep Easy Motel Vacancy." The building looked like something out of another era, lost-lung with appealing turquoise facade and a dozen doors lined in perfect symmetry. The parking lot was nearly empty. Finally, Daniel sighed, pulling in. "We'll crash for a few hours and finish the drive in the morning." Inside the lobby, the air smelled faintly of mildew. A ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, and the looked decades-old faded wallpaper. Rotary phone on the desk, a yellowed guest ledger open for min. Behind the counter stood a man in his 60s, wearing a crisp but outdated uniform. "One night?" he asked, his voice flat. "Yes, please," Daniel said, signing their names in the ledger. He didn't miss the strange detail. The names before theirs dated back decades. The most recent one read, 1975. The manager handed them a brass key on a heavy chain, room 6. Breakfast at 6 sharp. Sarah and Daniel exchanged glances. Who still used brass keys, but neither mentioned it. They were too tired. The room was small but tidy, furnished with a heavy oak dresser and a floral bedspread. Everything felt strangely preserved, as if untouched since the 1960s. There was no television, only an old radio humming faintly on the nightstand. "Creepy retro vibe," Sarah muttered, slipping off her shoes. Daniel laughed, though unease prickled his skin. "Let's just sleep." But rest didn't come easily. At 2 a.m., Sarah awoke to footsteps outside their door, heavy, deliberate, pacing back and forth. She nudged Daniel awake. "Do you hear that?" He listened. The sound continued for a minute, then stopped abruptly. He opened the door, but the hallway was empty. They tried to dismiss it, but minutes later, faint screams echoed from somewhere down the hall. Sarah clutched Daniel's arm. "What the hell was that?" Daniel grabbed the room phone, but the line was dead. Morning brought no relief. When Daniel pulled open the curtains, the parking lot was shrouded in fog, though the desert should have been blazing in sunlight. The motel seemed surrounded by nothing but gray. They hurried to the lobby. The desk was abandoned. The guest ledger remained open, and Daniel noticed something that made his stomach twist. Their names had been rewritten, but not in his handwriting. The ink was darker, fresher, like someone had pressed hard into the paper. "You see that, right?" Sarah whispered. Before Daniel could respond, the other guests emerged from their rooms. A dozen men and women, all dressed in clothing decades out of style: bell-bottoms, polyester suits, bouffant hair. They moved silently, staring at Sarah and Daniel with glassy eyes. "Okay," Daniel said, forcing calm. "We're leaving. Right now." They sprinted to their car, but when Daniel turned the key, the engine sputtered and died. He tried again, nothing. Sarah's hand shook as she grabbed his arm. "Dan, look." The fog outside the lot thickened, swallowing the desert. When Daniel tried to drive forward anyway, the headlights revealed only an endless wall of gray. Turning the wheel left or right didn't help. They circled back into the lot every time. It was as though the motel had been cut loose from the world. Back in their room, Sarah stared at the mirror above the dresser. She gasped. Her reflection wasn't quite right. Her clothes looked older, her hair styled differently, her face a little more lined. When she lifted her hand to touch the glass, her reflection didn't move. Daniel pulled her away, but his own discovery chilled him more. The guest ledger now listed their names under a column marked permanent. The other guests gathered outside their window, staring in unison. Their mouths moved, whispering words Sarah and Daniel couldn't hear. "Don't open the door," Daniel whispered. The whispers grew louder. The radio on the nightstand crackled to life, a voice seeping through the static. "Welcome to your stay. You'll never check out." They barricaded themselves in the room through the night, but exhaustion won. When Daniel awoke, sunlight streamed through the curtains. For a moment, hope flared. Maybe it had all been a dream. He opened the door. The hallway was empty, silent. The air smelled of dust and decay. Paint peeled from the walls. The once bright carpet was moth-eaten and rotten. "Sarah," he whispered. They rushed to the lobby, but it was no longer the quaint, outdated room from the night before. The counter was broken, cobwebs strung across the ceiling, the guest ledger buried beneath a thick layer of dust. "Dan," Sarah whispered, "this place hasn't been open in years." Before they could flee, voices echoed from down the hall, the same flat whispers as before. Figures emerged slowly from the shadows, faces blank, eyes hollow. Sarah grabbed Daniel's hand. "Run!" They bolted through the fog-choked lot, screaming as the shadows closed in. Daniel swore he felt cold hands brush his neck, pulling him back. Days later, a truck driver passing through the desert reported seeing an old ruin where a motel once stood. He swore he heard faint screams carried on the wind, though no one else believed him. But inside that crumbling building, the ledger remained. 2 new names had been added in crisp ink beneath the column marked permanent guests: Sarah and Daniel Carter. Story 3. The Desert Stalker. The desert highway stretched on forever, an endless black ribbon under the pale glow of the moon. Ben gripped the wheel tighter. The only sound in the world, the low hum of his engine. He had been driving for hours, trying to make it from Phoenix to Las Vegas overnight. The monotony was hypnotic, but the silence was preferable to the idea of stopping at some nameless roadside motel. He checked his rearview mirror and froze. Headlights glowed faintly in the distance behind him. At first it seemed harmless. After all, cars used this highway all the time, but something about the way the lights trailed him, unwavering, gnawed at his nerves. Miles passed. The headlights never wavered. If he sped up, they matched. If he slowed, they lingered at the same distance. Ben swallowed hard. Coincidence, he muttered to himself, but the words carried no weight. By the time he stopped at a tiny gas station 30 miles later, his nerves were raw. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting the lot in a sickly glow. He stepped inside, greeted by the stale scent of oil and dust. The clerk, a leathery man with tired eyes, glanced up. "Long drive?" "Yeah," Ben said, forcing a laugh. Anyone else stop by here tonight? A truck? Maybe." The man shook his head slowly. "Not in ours," Ben frowned. The headlights had been right behind him the whole way. He bought a soda and chips, hoping to shake the paranoia, but when he stepped outside, his heart stopped. There it was, a truck, parked at the far corner of the lot, engine idling, headlights still burning holes into his back. "Hey," Ben called nervously, but no one stepped out. The cab was dark. He climbed into his car and left quickly. The truck followed. For the next hour, no matter how fast or slow he drove, it stayed behind him. Always there, always silent. Ben's knuckles whitened against the steering wheel. "What do you want from me?" he whispered. The desert stretched endlessly, barren and dark. Cell reception had long since died. He considered pulling over and confronting the driver, but dread filled his gut. Something told him that would be the worst possible choice. The truck made its move an hour later. It surged forward, closing the distance until its blinding headlights filled Ben's rear window. The grille loomed inches from his bumper, the roar of its engine deafening. Panic shot through him. Jesus Christ. He floored the gas. The Civic's engine screamed as it pushed past 90, but the truck stayed glued to him, swerving, trying to push him off the road. His tires scraped the shoulder, gravel spitting out in sparks. "Please, please, please," he muttered, tears stinging his eyes. Finally, with a desperate swerve, Ben veered down a smaller service road, praying the truck wouldn't follow. For a moment, relief surged through him as the headlights vanished in the mirror. Then his stomach dropped. They reappeared seconds later, farther down the service road, as if the truck had been waiting for him there all along. Ben abandoned the car. He didn't think, he just bolted, sprinting into the jagged desert terrain, the cool night air burning his lungs. Behind him, the truck door slammed, and heavy boots crunched against gravel. "Running makes it fun," a voice called, low and taunting. Ben froze behind a cluster of boulders, his chest heaving. A flashlight beam swept across the sand, inches from his hiding place. He clamped a hand over his mouth. The man's footsteps grew closer, slower, deliberate. "I've been collecting travelers like you for years," the voice drawled. "The lonely ones, the tired ones. Nobody misses them out here." Ben's heart hammered so loudly he thought it would give him away. The light lingered, then moved on. He waited until the footsteps faded, then crept deeper into the desert. The silence pressed in, broken only by the faint hum of insects, but he knew the man was still hunting. Hours passed. Ben stumbled across a small wooden shack, half buried in sand. Desperation outweighed fear. He pushed inside. The stench hit him immediately. Rot, decay. Moonlight streamed through broken slats, illuminating piles of bones, dozens of them. skulls stacked in corners, jewelry, wallets, and keys scattered across the dirt floor, all tokens from other unlucky travelers. Ben gagged, bile rising in his throat, and then he heard the crunch of boots on sand outside. "You found my place," the voice said, closer now, almost gleeful. "That makes you special." The door slammed shut, the lock clicking from the outside. Ben hurled himself against the wood, but it wouldn't budge. He screamed, his fists raw as he pounded against it. Outside, the man laughed. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of you, just like the others." Days later, state troopers found Ben's Civic abandoned on the side of the highway. The engine was dead, the doors unlocked. No sign of him was ever recovered. Locals whispered about the Desert Stalker, a phantom truck that haunted lonely highways, hunting down travelers. And sometimes, late at night, truckers swore they saw a flashlight beam sweeping the sand, followed by the faint echo of a man's laughter. Story 4. The wrong turn into nowhere. The Petersons had been on the road since sunrise. David drove, his wife Linda navigated, and their 2 children, 8-year-old Ellie and 10-year-old Sam, sat in the back, headphones on, half asleep against their pillows. The family had planned a cross-country road trip as one last adventure before the school year. The GPS guided them faithfully for hours, but as they wound deeper into farmland and forest, the signal faltered. The screen froze, then flickered, before finally recalculating with a new route. "Looks like we take a left up ahead," Linda said. David frowned. "Pretty sure we should have stayed on the highway." "Trust the GPS," Linda insisted. So he turned left. The road narrowed, gravel crunching under the tires. Trees thickened on either side, their branches clawing at the sky. "This doesn't feel right," David muttered. But they pressed on until the trees broke and a small town appeared. It looked like something from another time. White houses with neat porches lined cracked sidewalks. A general store stood at the corner, its sign faded. The gas station had ancient pumps, the kind David hadn't seen since childhood. "Finally," Linda said with relief, "let's fuel up the pumps." "However, we're dead." David squeezed the handle. Nothing. Inside the gas station, the shelves were stocked with dusty cans and yellowed boxes. No clerk stood behind the counter. "This place is deserted," David whispered. Sam tugged his sleeve. "No, it isn't. They're watching." David turned. In the window above the shop, a curtain shifted. A pale face peeked out before vanishing. Ellie whimpered. "Back to the car," David ordered. They drove down one street, then another, searching for an exit, but every road curved back into the town square. It was as if the streets folded onto themselves, trapping them in a loop. "I don't understand," Linda said, panic rising. "We're going in circles." David's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "We'll find a way out." The children were silent now, staring out the windows. Ellie whispered, "They don't want us to leave." By late afternoon, their car began to sputter. The gas gauge dipped toward empty, though David swore they'd filled up just hours before. He pulled over. "We're walking." They moved through the town on foot. The silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of their footsteps. Houses loomed with dark windows, but sometimes they swore they saw shadows moving inside. At the schoolhouse, the front doors hung open. Inside, chalk still marked the board. Lesson 5. Community is forever. Child-sized desks sat neatly in rows, untouched for decades. Sam backed away. "I don't like it here." Neither did David. As dusk fell, the family returned to the car, deciding it was safer inside. They locked the doors and huddled together. That was when the whispers began. At first, faint, then louder. Dozens of voices, circling the car, though no one was visible. "Stay with us," they chanted forever. Ellie began to hum a nursery rhyme one David didn't recognize. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked. "The people in the windows," she said simply. David's blood ran cold. The night dragged on. Shapes gathered in the darkness outside. Human silhouettes, dozens of them, shifting closer with each glance. Their faces were indistinct, but their eyes glowed faintly. Linda clutched the children. "Don't look at them." The car rocked gently, as if pushed by unseen hands. "Forever," the voices whispered. "Stay forever." David slammed the horn, shouting at them to leave. The sound echoed, but the figures didn't move. Near dawn, exhaustion overtook them. David's eyes fluttered shut despite his terror. When he awoke, the car was silent, empty. Linda, his voice cracked. Ellie, Sam, no answer. He stumbled out of the car. The town was different, now brighter, more alive. Curtains swayed in open windows. People walked the streets, smiling, but their faces were wrong to pale, their movements too smooth, as though mimicking humanity. Among them were his wife and children. "Linda," Hugh shouted. She turned, smiling serenely. "We're home now, David." The children took her hands. Their eyes glowed faintly like the others. David fell to his knees. Weeks later, a trucker reported stumbling into an abandoned town while trying to shortcut through backroads. He found a car parked in the square, doors unlocked, keys in the ignition. Inside were children's drawings pinned to the seat, smiling stick figures standing in front of houses. Beneath them, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "We live here now." The trucker swore he heard faint laughter as he drove away, but when he checked his GPS later, the town wasn't on any map, and no one ever found David Peterson again. Story 5. The last rest stop. The highway was nearly deserted at 2 a.m., just a stretch of asphalt cutting through empty farmland. Tyler and Mark had been driving for nearly 12 hours, fueled by energy drinks and fast food. They were best friends, headed back to college after a weekend concert trip. "Man, I need to stretch," Mark groaned, cracking his neck. "Same," Tyler agreed. His eyes burned from staring at the endless black road. "Next rest stop, we pull over." As if on cue, a glowing sign appeared. "Rest area 1 mile." Relief washed over them as Tyler guided the car into the lot. The rest stop was brightly lit, its lot strangely clean. A row of vending machines buzzed. Bathrooms stood at the far end of the lot, their doors propped open. A few people sat at the picnic tables under the fluorescent lights, too still, too quiet. "Looks normal enough," Mark said, stretching as he stepped out. But Tyler couldn't shake the weirdness. The people didn't talk, didn't move. They just sat there, staring at nothing, hands folded on the tables. "Grab some snacks and let's go," Tyler muttered. The vending machine spat out a bag of chips. When he turned, Mark was already heading toward the bathrooms. That's when Tyler noticed something strange. The clock on his dashboard still read 2:07 a.m. It hadn't moved since they arrived. When Mark came back, they climbed into the car, laughing about how sketchy the place felt. Tyler pulled out of the lot, headlights cutting down the highway. But 5 minutes later, his stomach dropped. The car rolled back into the same rest stop. Same glowing lights, same vending machines, same silent people at the tables. "What the hell?" Mark whispered. "Did you turn around?" "No," Tyler snapped. His hands trembled on the wheel. They tried again, 10 minutes this time, but when the road curved, they found themselves in the same lot again, headlights sweeping over the same cars and figures. The clock still read 2:07. "This isn't happening," Tyler muttered. "It's gotta be some kind of loop." Mark's voice was shaking now. "Look at them." The people at the tables weren't sitting quite the same anymore. Their heads had tilted toward the car, eyes unblinking, faces slack. "Drive faster," Mark said. Tyler floored it, the engine whining as the speedometer climbed. But no matter how far or fast they went, the rest stop appeared again, waiting like a predator. After the 5th loop, panic broke them. They abandoned the car, bolting toward the bathrooms, hoping for another exit. Inside, the air was damp, reeking of mold. The fluorescent lights flickered. The stalls were empty, but the mirrors lining the wall made Tyler freeze. The reflections weren't right. In the glass, he and Mark were older, their faces gaunt, eyes sunken, hair streaked with gray. Their mouths opened in silent screams. Mark stumbled back. "We're trapped. We're already. Don't say it," Tyler hissed. The bathroom door creaked open. One of the travelers stepped in, a woman in a sundress. Her skin was pale, waxy. Her eyes were glass marbles, and when she opened her mouth, no words came, just a low, mechanical hum. They fled. Back in the lot, the other travelers had risen from the tables. They moved stiffly, like puppets, forming a slow circle around Tyler and Mark. Their mouths opened and closed in unison, a chorus of whispers. "You'll never leave. You'll never leave." Mark grabbed Tyler's arm. "If road, it's the only way." They sprinted back to the car, slammed the doors, and roared out of the lot, this time swerving off the highway and tearing across the dark fields. For a moment, it seemed to work. The lights of the rest stop vanished behind them, swallowed by the night. Then the world itself seemed to fall away. The headlights no longer lit grass or dirt in the blackness, an empty void stretching endlessly. The car shuddered, floating as though suspended. Tyler screamed, slamming the brakes, but the vehicle only drifted deeper into the dark. The engine died. The next instant, they were sitting at a picnic table in the rest stop, their bodies stiff, their hands folded. The other travelers sat around them, silent and unmoving. Days later, a state trooper stopped at the rest area. Everything looked normal, empty, quiet, harmless. He bought a soda from the vending machine, glanced around, and froze. Two new figures sat at a table under the fluorescent lights. Young men frozen in place, eyes staring into nothing. Their faces matched missing persons posters later plastered across nearby towns. Tyler Gray, 21, and Mark Harris, 22. And if anyone passed the rest stop after 2 a.m., they swore the clock on the wall inside the lobby was always stuck at 2:07.